we're joined by Mack, who's running for School Board District 4. So go ahead with a 2-minute introduction.
Well, hi, I'm Mack. I've been deeply engaged for the past 3 or 4 years in education advocacy. Before that, I was doing sustainability consulting, primarily in waste reduction recycling for businesses and the public sector, cities, helping them improve their policy and programs around recycling and sustainability issues. But 3 or 4 years ago, when my daughter started school, there's big growth boundaries challenges going on, and what was happening was really dividing our communities and creating a lot of consternation. And I saw this problem and realized that I wanted to be able to help impact all the students across the district, not just my own school and my own community. So my husband and I kind of threw together some analysis and went to the district and got engaged in that discussion, and it seemed to kind of impact some of their decision making. And then morning after that vote, I realized that I needed to get involved more deeply, because there's a lot of issues with Seattle Public Schools and education in general, and volunteer work on the school level is incredibly important. Lots of great parents are engaged at that level, which one-to-one is really important. But for me, I have a policy background, I'm a master's in public administration, so I see the systemic issues and the challenges of the district and the state. And so I took on the role of Seattle Council PTSA legislative chair, and then later co-founded Washington's Paramount Duty, was the founding president of that, and I've done a number of other task forces, including capacity management task force and the city neighborhood council, youth schools and education committee too.
Great, thank you. So now we have our 4 prepared questions. These are 2-minute answers, and they're right in front of you if you want to turn it over and read along as we read them aloud. And Sophia, will you do number 1?
I'm sorry, you want me to read it? Or
oh, no,
I'll
Sophia's
read
going
it.
to read it.
Go around and read it.
Excellent.
And also read along if you'd like.
Okay, great, thank you.
What specific actions can the school board take to help assure equal education opportunities and help close the achievement equal opportunity gap? How do you see stopping the suspension, expulsion, prison pipeline that is affecting so many kids?
These are some of the biggest issues that we're dealing with in our local education system, as well as nationwide. We need more money for all of our schools. We're not getting sufficient funding. That's very clear by the contempt of court the state is in for not funding basic education. However, we also need to ensure that more funding targeted appropriately to those folks that need it more is provided. We need additional funding for counselors and family support workers and wraparound services. The whole child needs to be considered, and those sorts of, targeted, intentional supports are really important in the schools. So that the policy decisions from a school board perspective matter, because the school board approves the budget and sets priorities for, are we going to improve where the funding is going to help improve the opportunity gap. And some kids need more, some schools need more, and we need to continue improving our equitable distribution of the limited funds that we've got. And in regards to the stopping the suspension, expulsion, prison pipeline, this is a cultural systemic change that needs direct support from the district in terms of trainings and principal culture. I think leadership at the top matters, and the school board selects the superintendent, and we're likely to have that opportunity in the next year or so. And leadership matters there as well, and there needs to be a big focus on the disproportionate discipline that is going on, and make those changes to improve it.
Brittany, number 2.
How do you view the role of a school board member in terms of district governance? Do you believe it is the role of a school board member to advocate on behalf of the public with administrative staff?
I'm a little confused by the question, act on behalf of the public with administrative staff. So the school board's responsibility is to guide policy, hire and fire the superintendent, and support community engagement. It's not our job to micromanage what's going on in the district. I mean, the school board is one of 7. However, it's also our job to listen carefully to the issues that are coming forward from the community to ensure that the district is hearing those issues and taking them into account. I'll actually use an example that I think is a good one of what the board, a decision that the board made earlier this year that was highly impactful and supportive of thousands of children, which was not on its face the first recommendation from the district staff. And that was that one of the schools in the North End was going to be open as a neighborhood school. In that change, it was going to shift 900 students, making the move from their school communities that they're into other schools, so disrupting lots of students and families. And that school was going to be a highly concentrated, high poverty school. And the board decided not to do that. Instead, they made it an option school and didn't disrupt all of those families. And that was against the district staff's recommendation. However, it was all of the board members, in listening to the community, helped to make a decision for the benefit for every child.
Great. John, number 3.
What are your priorities and how do you propose SPS finds the necessary funds to address the classroom infrastructure needs of the district? Please specifically address the needs of Seattle's growing north downtown population for an elementary school as well as other neighborhoods in Seattle.
This is the issue that got me into education advocacy and the one that still is close to my heart. The schoolhouse is the center of the neighborhood in our community. Our buildings matter. And having sufficient space and having good educational environments is critical because it's the base level of the services that we're providing, as well as teachers and support staff and all of that. We have intense growth in the north and in West Seattle. We've been growing like crazy and opening new schools. We still don't have sufficient buildings for the future. We actually still need more buildings and more space. We need to do a better job on the long-range planning and collaborating with the city on that planning, identifying areas where we could build and fill in the gaps. We sold off a bunch of buildings, as many of you may know, a long time ago, and those buildings basically created kind of deserts in those areas where there isn't a school to attend and the other schools around are more crowded. So we need to kind of look at that and work with the city on the long-range planning to ensure. The other option for funding is something that should be considered in my mind, is developer impact fees. It's a mechanism that is authorized by the Growth Management Act of the state, where there are fees assigned to new developments that are bringing in more kids, and they fund specifically schools. Most other jurisdictions around us assess these fees, and Seattle's one of the very few that doesn't. So this is another source of income that could help fill the gap.
Great. Clayton, number 4.
What do you think the district's testing policy should be?
High stakes testing is high stakes testing is potentially damaging to a lot of kids, families, and the whole system. Tying test scores to dollars can be misleading and not be the priority where we should be spending, and identifying that these communities need more supports, counselors, etc. And just looking solely at test scores is very limiting. I'm personally not opposed to testing in general. Actually, we do need to be able to evaluate where we're at, how kids are doing, provide ongoing feedback so that we can help children succeed. But there's a lot of standardized testing happening at this point that may or may not be of benefit. And we may want to focus more attention on teaching, and not just teaching to the test, but teaching and building relationships and supporting the whole child, because those are really important aspects to learning.
Great, so now we'll open up to follow-up questions. These are 1-minute answers, and we'll start with Robert.
What is your personal position on charter schools, and if you are elected to the board, would you maintain the district's current policy of not being an authorizer for charter schools in the district?
I'm opposed to charter schools. We have a lot of choice in our school system already. We actually have a lot of great programs. We have option schools, which provide students with various options for focusing in certain ways. Salmon Bay kind of has an arts focus. Those kind of programs, the various option schools that we have are really, really popular, and this is what a lot of families want, is they want choice. They want to be able to, provide an appropriate individualized education for their child, which we have and can do more of. We need to build on those programs, particularly the ones that are successful. And there isn't, in my mind, any justified reason for privatizing those options. Charter schools are primarily about privatizing and not keeping public schools public, and public schools are the foundation of our democracy. So I'm opposed to charter schools, and I would keep with the current policy.
Additional questions? Brittany, and then Liz.
A new elementary school is scheduled to open in Magnolia in 2018. What thoughts do you have about the process for determining the boundaries for that and for populating the school for kids who are already in elementary schools, and might be disrupted? Should there be certain ages populated slowly, etc.?
In full disclosure, it's my neighborhood, and my kids will be impacted. My children actually attend Lawton at this point, so we will be impacted by whatever decisions made. Boundary redraws are really challenging because it's complex. But one of the things that I think the district may want to consider is identifying which programs and services, and if there would be another option school added, subtracted. Those kind of things are really important for figuring out what the boundaries should be. I'm not really clear if the district has really clarified those kind of questions first, because those really impact which students want to go where. For example, in Queen Anne, you may have families being willing to cross over Magnolia easily if it's a school that is really highly desirable, if it's a STEM school or something like that, so that you can draw people in with those kind of decisions. My time just ended, but more planning it needs to be a solid engagement with the community, planning from the outset, and sorry.
That's all right.
We can talk more.
Okay. Liz and then David.
Hi. So you mentioned that we do have a pretty good variety of option schools here, and that is one reason that we're able to keep charter schools from coming in. However, those schools tend to have to fight for their lives a lot of the time financially with the district. I can't remember because they keep switching 4 and 5, whether Nova is currently in 4 or 5, but that's a prime example of a school that's had to fight for its life a number of times, and the loss of that school would really necessitate that those kids find someplace outside the district, outside the public system. So I'm wondering how much you can advocate from your role.
Well, I believe strongly that the option schools need to be vibrant, and they need to be able to provide the services that they are offering or that they come in with. So, for example, the Center School, which is a high school that's arts focused, they lost a substantial amount of funding, which actually impacts their ability to provide that focus. I think when we commit to these option schools, we need to make sure that we do continue to fund those aspects that make it the option school. Neighborhood schools are also equally as important. I think, you know, we're in a situation of Sophie's Choices. We have a $50 million shortfall for next year. I mean, and that's after working really hard to get the levy cliff passed, where we were able to get 24 million back into the budget. But there's this huge shortfall, and so the school district and the board is looking at these Sophie's Choices of how to resolve those. And I think that we still need to continue to focus efforts equitably where the students that need it more, and to ensure that we continue great programs.
David?
This particular school board race went from a vacuum to a black star in nanoseconds. Right here at the last moment. I'm wondering if you would comment on what was the tipping point for you in making the decision to run, and why. I'm sure you know as much about your opponents as we do, but why you're the one.
I started getting calls about a week ago from friends and colleagues in advocacy that said, we need you to run. We need your objective listening skills, your energy, your passion for every child. The advocacy that I do and have done for the past 3+ years on education it's been broad intentionally. You know, I'm working for every child in Seattle Public Schools and not just my own kid. I've taken a big deep dive into understanding all of the policies that impact and how those things kind of work together. And I have this deep intention in myself to figure out how can we find the solutions that best serve every child. And we don't have to do these sort of choices, that we can actually listen to all sides and find those solutions that are.
We have time for maybe a couple more questions, John?
One of the other funding equity issues that we have here, this plays out nationwide, is a difference in the level of funding that a community can raise in certain parts of the city compared to others, so Queen Anne versus, say, South Park. What are some things that can be done to look at? Are there ways to distribute some of that?
So the reason why we co-founded Washington's Paramount Duty is because it is the state's fundamental basic responsibility, paramount duty, to fund basic education. It is not the local PTA's, who are all volunteers, job to be funding basic education. Every child deserves an equitably funded and amply funded and sustainably funded basic education. When you have this vacuum of funding and needs that still exist, you have the folks that can afford to step up and they fill the gaps, and the folks that can't are sitting there going, this is not fair. So I think that for me, the focusing on, we need the state to actually meet their paramount duty and ensure that those funds are distributed equitably. We also do have other things that are outside of basic education that we need to continue to support. Family and education levy dollars are really important to the district for wraparound services. There are lots of other things that we do as a local community to try to target those funds where kids need it most.
Time for one more? Anybody has one? Brittany?
I just wanted to give you another minute to talk about the Magnolia Elementary School, if you wanted, since you ran out of time.
Oh, sure. So one of the things that the district, I sat on the capacity management task force this last year, and I've been deeply engaged in trying to understand the very complex map that it is across the district. We have 80 plus schools, 90 plus schools. In Magnolia, Queen Anne, redrawing the boundaries can get really funky if it's not done thoughtfully. And I think that some of the ideas that might be coming forward from the community about the potential for, say, Blaine being an option school, because it is a K-8, that might actually help draw the appropriate number of folks into Blaine and allow the boundaries for the other schools to remain normal, whatever that is, but more reasonable and appropriate for, walk zones and those sorts of things. And I think that the engagement around that needs to be a little bit more robust with the community, of exploring those options and coming up with the other scenarios that could possibly serve most people.
All right, so we're out of time. If you want to take 30 seconds for a closing statement.
Well, I just hope you all can support me for school board. I'm really excited about this role. I'm nervous about such so many opponents, but I just really care about all the kids in the Seattle Public Schools and the value of public education as part of our democracy and how important that is, and how important it is to the city that we have great schools and a great community because it's the center of our neighborhood. And I think I have the both analytical skills and broad systemic thinking, and make good decisions that I can serve you well.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.